Hey, I'm Kilroy. Welcome to another edition of Kilroy's Outlaws, Legends, and Behind the Music, and we're going to do some good talking today. Hang on.
Welcome to Kilroy's Outlaws and Legends Behind the Music with your host, multi-award-winning music producer, Eddie Kilroy. And now, here's your host, Eddie Kilroy.
Hey, today we're going to be talking about Eddie Rabbitt. Wow, what a talented guy. Also a good neighbor of mine. I lived on, I only say this to show you what a good neighbor he was. If you went east on 96, that'd be west on 96, out of Franklin, Tennessee, and you came to Highway 46 and turned back left, which would be to the south, and go down there and you'd be running into a little community and a store called Leaper's Park. Well, I moved out there because it was quiet and peaceful, had a place up on the hill, and then all of a sudden, Eddie Rabbitt bought a place almost directly across the street from mine. All right, then again, shortly after, I'm talking about a month or two, Winona Judd bought a place across the street and a little bit to the right of my place. And lo and behold, here comes Mama, Leona. She bought down the road. That's fine. I love these people. But all of a sudden, I've got tour buses coming out there and driving real slow past Eddie Rabbitt's house and Winona. On top of that, Winona had, from what I hear, I didn't have to count them, but I heard she had 23 cats. Well, I want to tell you, I'd get up in the morning, go out on the patio to have coffee, and I saw cats. Her cats came over a lot, and I don't have anything against cats, but when you get a wad of them walking around, you're drinking coffee, and they're meowing and scrubbing on your leg, it's kind of hard to concentrate. But she loved her cats. That's good. But I'm getting back to Eddie Rabbitt now. Rabbitt lived across the street, a two-story brick house. It was an older home that he had restored, and very little activity. Eddie was a quiet guy that kind of stayed to himself. That's why I can tell you that Eddie Rabbitt and I did not run together. We weren't like big pals. He was very quiet, almost an introvert. And so we knew each other on a howdy relationship. I'd run on to him and say, "Hey, Kilroy." I'd say, "Hey, Rabbitt, how you doing?" Nice guy, really nice guy, super talented. I find it very hard to believe, and I did at the time, that he was a native of New York. Now, not upstate New York, where it's kind of country, and the land's beautiful and everything. Actually from Manhattan. Actually from the borough of Brooklyn, which is like really being in New York. But his people moved across the river to New Jersey, where he was basically raised there. But he was from, I guess, a child. He was really enthralled with country music and just doing a whole lot of things in his mind about being in country music. His father was a musician, and both of his parents were immigrants from Ireland. And, of course, music over in Ireland is very, very big. And a lot of people I feel the same way, that country music derived from Irish music because they used a lot of the same instruments like guitars and accordion, fiddle, or what have you. And Eddie Rabbitt's father was a very accomplished fiddle player and accordion player and played the dance halls in New York. So Eddie was constantly exposed to music, and he loved music. And I still wonder, how did somebody from New York become so enthralled with country music? But he did. And everything I've read about him and everything I've heard about his old friends said, man, he lived and breathed country music. And it turned out that he wanted to do so badly that after he learned a little bit, he got like most of us, I did the same thing. I received the same thing. 12 years old, 13 years old, 10 years old, somewhere in there, you get your first guitar. And it's a cheap guitar. It's going to be like $10 or $12. It's going to be a Stella. It's going to be a Silvertone, which was from Sears Roebuck. Several of those cheap guitars. Your parents would always buy you a cheap guitar to see if you were going to even be interested in it. Well, apparently Eddie Rabbitt was very interested in it because he learned to play enough at an early age to play some of the clubs and some of the dance halls and so forth that his father was playing there in New York. And it's just another thing, too, before we go any further on Eddie Rabbitt, and I'm going to pick this up, okay? But how many times have I told you folks out there that listen and how much I appreciate you watching and or listening, it depends on what you're doing. I made a mistake on a show I did with Conway Twitty. And I've asked people, if you catch me on a mistake, please correct me, because I don't go to Wikipedia. I don't go online. Everything I tell you about any of these artists are because I had a personal relationship with them, or I was there in Nashville from the beginning, so I know a little bit about what's going on. But I'm prone to make a mistake. And when I was doing Conway, I said when he was a rock and roll artist, he wrote a country song that Ray Price recorded and had a #1 record called "My Shoes Keep Walking Back to You." And I really remembered it as that, okay? Well, boom, somebody sent me on our site a correction saying, Kilroy, I've searched the internet, and he did not write, walk me back. My shoes keep walking back to you. I was concerned because Conway had those 2 songs about walking. Conway wrote the one, Walk Me to the Door. Not my shoes keep walking back to you, as I earlier said. Now that that is corrected, and now that I thank the gentleman that wrote for setting me straight on that, we'll continue with Eddie Rabbitt, okay? Rabbitt has some great stories. He loved country, and he just, he just ate it up from everything I know from talking to friends that perhaps knew him in New York. And he dropped out of school at the age of 16 because his mind was just full of country music, and they referred to him as a New Yorker that was an encyclopedia of country music. He studied it and knew it all. Then he says, okay, I pulled the same thing he did. Time to go to Nashville, Tennessee. If I'm going to do anything in country music, I've got to be where the action is. He moved up there. I think Rabbitt was like in his, maybe late 20s, maybe, I don't know, 28, 27 years old. He moved to Nashville. He had $1,000. Wow, he was rolling in it. I moved to Nashville, I had $40. Yep, but he'd worked, and I appreciate that. So many people get there, and they say, I'm just going to work on my music and let everything take care of itself. Well, as you know, in today's world and in that day, things didn't take care of themselves. You had to work. So Eddie worked some as a truck driver. He worked in an ice cream parlor. He picked fruits and grapes, and they did have vineyards up in Tennessee at that time. They were starting to grow some grapes to make wine out of. I don't know if he was stomping the grapes to make the wine. I had a friend of mine that said he stomped grapes for wine. Every now and then they'd get a toenail. He said that didn't go over too big, but I don't know how many grapes Eddie Rabbitt scraped or stepped on or cleaned up for wine, but he did it, I'm sure. He took on those kind of odd jobs, driving a truck, whatever, to make a buck. Then he signed with a publishing company, a real stalwart, an older publishing company, Hill and Range Music. Been around for 100 years. Based out of New York, and they opened a Nashville office, and Eddie told me he got a draw of $37.50, which wasn't a lot, but that was about what some of them did. I know when I had my publishing company with Warner Brothers, a partnership with them, I'd put my writers on the huge sum of $100 a week draw. Now, that's a draw, to explain to you, against future royalties. So Eddie signed with Hill and Range, but here's the hook. Elvis Presley also had a company, a joint venture with Hill and Range, Elvis Presley Music. So Eddie writes this song, Kentucky Rain. He wrote it with Dick Herd, and I'll get back to Dick Herd in a minute. But Hill and Range published it. huge record. As you know, Elvis cut anything. He could have sang page number 47 out of a phone book, and it would have been a hit record. But Kentucky Rain was a huge, huge record. He wrote that song with a guy by the name of Dick Hurd. How he met up with Dick Hurd, I'm not sure. Dick Hurd, I'm going to tell you again, I did not know him intimately other than just passing. But he seemed to me to be a guy that was doing some things in the industry, but they were always kind of on the fringes. Like if, I think Johnny Lee came to town several years before he had the big record from the soundtrack of Urban Cowboy. And I think Dick Hurd did a demo on him, and he did things like that. He was never like a driving force, but nevertheless, he co-wrote Kentucky Rain with Eddie Rabbitt, which made him a ton of money. That was amazing. That kicked his career off, actually. You get an Elvis Presley record, all of a sudden you're hotter than a double-barrel son of a gun, and the Hill and Range thing didn't hurt him or anything. And he had some other songs, too. He had a song called Patch Me Up that Elvis cut. I suspect that was an album cut because I never heard the song, but I know he told me one day I got an Elvis cut again on a song called Patch Me Up. At that time, I'd forgotten the name of it at the time, but I saw it on an album later. And then he had a song. I was telling Liz one time, and she was asking me about songwriters and what have you, and she'd hear a song on the radio, and say, wonder where he got that idea. Now, if it was a cheating song, or she said, oh, maybe he wrote it about cheating. They were cheating each other. No. Many times, 99% of the time, it's nothing personal about a song that a songwriter writes. Okay, it's just an idea, or what we call a hook, which would be an incredible line. And what Eddie was telling me is that he was eating a bowl of Captain Crunch cereal and came up with the idea of pure love from that cereal. I've never had cereal talk to me before, at least not in that dimension. Anyway, he wrote a song called Pure Love, inspired by a bowl of Captain Crunch. Obviously, as you well know, Ronnie Millsap recorded it, and boom, it was number one. So get a box of cereal and eat some Captain Crunch. You might write a big song off of it. But he had some awfully good songs, really, really good songs, and some big songs. And then he signed with Elektra Records, which is a subsidiary of Warner Brothers, and started recording as an artist. Now, he had a couple of little small label deals before. I think one was with that guy I mentioned earlier, Dick Hurd. He had a small little label, and he may have put out a couple of records that did nothing on Eddie Rabbitt. But, however, he got a record deal with Elektra, which you get a song done by Elvis and a couple other hits, it will propel you many times into a record deal. And it propelled him into Elektra Records, which was a good label. It was a subsidiary of Warner Brothers. Matter of fact, I did Jerry Lee Lewis Records, and he was on Elektra Records, and we had some big records on there. But anyway, Eddie Rabbitt signed there, and man, did he get started some hits. And number one, too, like I said, Pure Love, the Captain Crunch thing. And he had, I know that got him the Male Vocalist of the Year from the Academy of Country Music. Had Drinking My Baby Off My Mind. That was a number one record. I mean, he was popping them out. Driving My Life Away. Well, yes, I like that. Love a Rainy Night. I mean, Eddie was leaving a lot on the table. He did a lot of good things. But getting back to Eddie and his personal life, he had some tragedies there. He lost a son. Actually, he lost it about when I was living across the road from him, but I did not know that. They kept it very, very quiet because they were going through, it was quite a trauma for he and his wife. By the way, his wife was named Janine, and I never did see her up close. I was up on a hill, and Eddie's place was down on the road a little bit, but I had a good view of it, and I'd be outside occasionally, and I would see a lady walking around, and she was a smaller lady in stature, and Eddie Rabbitt was a pretty big boy. He was almost my size. I think Rabbitt was standing about 6'3" or so, and his wife was a tiny little old thing, And I would see them occasionally walking around out there, but they were very private. They didn't have a lot of activity. And getting back to their privacy, when their son died, he had I think a liver problem or kidney problem, I'm not sure, but they did a transplant, and it did not take, and they lost him. And they had absolutely no publicity. Rabbitt did not want any because he didn't want to be, people call and say, oh, I'm so sorry, this and that. He was a very private guy, like I've said a number of times today. But he lost a son then and kind of withdrew from the music business for a while, kind of laid though, and then he came back he came back kicking. He really did, with a lot of songs. He had, he did, I almost forgot, after he started having those records on Elektra Records, I've told you before when I was talking about Gilly, and I'm not being redundant, I'm just doing this again with Eddie Rabbitt, you have got to get out in front of a lot of people. And if you have one or two hit records, that isn't going to draw 25,000 people, okay? So you need to go out with a big-name act. So he was able to hook up through his booking agency to go out and open for Kenny Rogers. He went out and opened for Dolly Parton, which enabled him to perform in front of, over a number of shows, hundreds of thousands of people all of a sudden say, hey, that's Eddie Rabbitt. Yeah, wow. Well, eventually he got to the point where he was big enough to go out on his own and draw a good crowd. But he had some good things, and he had all the big number one country records, but he had some big adult contemporary records, which was kind of strange for the time because you were either country or you were adult contemporary or you were country and you were rock and roll or whatever. But he had the finesse in his writing to go both ways. He had hits that were country that crossed over into the adult contemporary charts in Billboard, which was quite a feat, and it also elevates your personal appearance money considerably. He had one with Crystal, a number one record with Crystal. Also, it was in a theme song, or not in a theme song, it was in a big soap opera, which I'm not a soap opera fan. Would you believe that I'm not a soap opera fan? That's a lie. I stay glued to the TV for All My Children. All My Children was my favorite. I would not go in the studio if All My Children was on TV. The song was You and I. He did that with Crystal Gale. It went number one, in the adult contemporary charts and Billboard country charts too with Crystal. That was a big one. So Eddie was kind of multi-talented, and he was touching all the bases. And when you start touching all the bases like that, you're making a lot of money. And he did that. But I watched him. I wasn't spying on him, but I watched him. And in a way, there were some sad things going on. I was talking about soap operas. He had the song in Days of Our Lives. And that was another one of my favorite soap operas, Days of the Lives. That wasn't it. It was Days of Our Lives. And I would watch that, and I would put it on my ironing board up before the TV, and I would just iron. And I'm lying to you. I never ironed anything in my life. I've heated some branding irons and stuck them to some cattle and what have you. But the Days of Our Lives, he did the duet with Juice Newton on that, and that was a big record also. So again, showing the depth of him is incredible. We did so many things. I'm going to be skipping around on some stories. There was a studio there in Nashville called Emerald, and I loved the sound of the studio. Now, there was a group of guys that were they were very close-knit, and that was Eddie Rabbitt, a guitar player that was wonderful by the name of Billy Joe Walker, David Malloy, who he and even Stephen, I think Even was part owner on Emerald Studios, not sure of that. I know David was, and they would all kind of hang there, and they all would partake in some things that would help them get up. And, I'm probably talking about maybe cocaine, I'm not sure. But a funny story, I was producing Louis Mandrell there, and they had tiles, acoustical tiles, in the control room. And R.C. Bannon was not the toughest guy in the world. As a matter of fact, R.C., as much as I liked him, he was a little on the wussy side. And Louise had bought him some hair plugs, so he'd have a head of hair. He had turned bald at an early age, And he was telling me, "Oh my gosh, Kilroy, my head's killing me. These plugs are so painful." And he was taking a lot of pain pills, and so he's just kind of bumming around and looked spaced out and what have you. And there was a tab on one of the tiles in the control room, and he said, "I wonder what this is." And he pulled that tab. It was a little pocket in there where the guys kept their drugs. Not that they were druggies or heavy users of drugs, but in case they needed to be in there for, for 30 hours, then they would need a little help to stay up. Anyway, I thought that was amusing because when he pulled that out, his eyes got big and he put it back real quick. But RC was okay. My throat's giving me problems today. The darn frog in it, He also wrote a George Strait song that was really, really big, "I Want to Dance with You." Man, he made a bunch. I'm sitting here naming these hits off, and I really didn't realize until I started thinking about telling you about Eddie Rabbitt that he had had so much success with so many other people besides himself in writing songs for them. He had a studio, I remember, behind his house. It was just a separate building, and I was over there one time, and it was nothing fancy. It was just a small room and a studio where when he wrote something, he could go put it down and listen to it back and see what he wanted to tweak and make it a little better. Most people have those studios that are professional writers that they have access to them to work on their stuff, But Eddie Rabbitt was a good guy, and he was a very private guy. He died, unfortunately, at a very young age of 58. He was a heavy, heavy smoker, as I was, and gosh, looking back now, how blessed I was not to come down with lung cancer. But he had lung cancer and died at the age of 58. Much too young, much too young. He was in the theme song on that movie of Clint Eastwood, which everybody liked, with the orangutan. Every time I talk about that movie, I said, the one with the monkey. And Liz corrects me. He says, it was a orangutan, you dummy, not a monkey. Well, he lived in a tree, so I thought it was a monkey. It was an orangutan. And he did the music there, that Every Which Way But Loose. He wrote that song that was in the movie. So he had credits out the kazoo. I mean, just lots of them. And he died young. Like I said, 58 is too young to die. I mean, it really is. But getting back to the privacy side, even when he died, and he's living right across the road from me, I did not know for several days that he had passed away. Everything was like, don't tell anybody anything. Don't tell them I died. Don't tell them I lost my son. He was just very private. He didn't want to hoop to lie over his death or anyone else in his family. Now this I'm going over, how do I put this? I want to preface this by saying that this is hearsay from people that I respect, that I do know were close to Eddie Rabbitt, and I wasn't one of those. But his wife, Janine, apparently her father was a former CIA guy or some government agency that was into espionage or anti-espionage, and some sort of government agency like that. And people were after her, and she really believed this. And I had to, after the people told me that knew him, I had to kind of believe it's true, because every evening a Williamson County Sheriff's Department off-duty policeman would park in front of their house, in front of the gate, in his car, where it was always visible that there was a deputy sheriff on duty, and he would spend the night there. And I think I heard also, and I have no idea because I've never hired an off-duty policeman, but somebody said that they cost $25 an hour or something. So if he stayed all night, it was costing a pretty good chunk of money to keep that policeman there all night, to make his wife more comfortable that she was protected for whoever that may or may not be after her. The lung cancer got him in 1997. It was after that. He came out and he died in 98. Prior to that, he had an album called Beating the Odds, and he also was inducted into the Nashville Writers Hall of Fame, which, wow, after all those hits, he should have been. But I sure have enjoyed talking about my neighbor, Eddie Rabbitt, and the fact that he and Leona and Winona Judd were the three that encouraged me to get the heck out of Leapers Park and go all the way across the county to a little community called College Grove, where I could be away from the tour buses and the stars. And right away, it wasn't within 6 months, Trace Atkins moved out there. Luckily enough, he didn't get big enough to draw a big bus crowd, so that was not annoying. But my wife told me, Don't say this. Don't say this. Why did you keep moving? Why did you keep moving? My good friend that passed away, Baxter Black, the cowboy humorist and a great, great dear friend of ours, once said, "A man should never live where he can't pee off his porch." And I always use that as an analogy, though I didn't do that, but it was there if I needed to do that. But I certainly hope that you've enjoyed this, and I want to mention our sponsor. I'm so high on it, and that's Total Feeds. Total Equine, Total Canine, Total Goat, Total People. Incredible product. Dr. Harry Anderson had worked years to develop the products, so go to their website, totalfeeds.com. In the meantime, this is Kilroy saying I got to put my hat back on, turn it around a little bit where I look hip. No, what I wanted to say is I'm gonna ask you one more time. And we're trying to build this and let people know some of the history behind the artist of country music in Nashville and my 4 decades there. And so to keep this going, I need subscribers. And I'm sincere in saying I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe to our show, if you would hit like, if you would share it with people, and if you got a pal, which I know you have hundreds of friends, you'd say, hey, watch this. If you like it, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Pretty soon it'll be shared everywhere, and we'll be able to build a bigger and bigger audience, okay? Subscribe and comment. Your comments are more than welcome. Remember I told you the first of the show, the gentleman said, Kilroy, you were wrong on the Ray Price Conway Twitty song. I said, I missed? I did? Wow, let me do some checking. I'll correct that. I want to thank that gentleman for correcting me on that. It was Walk Me to the Door by Conway Twitty wrote that for Ray Price, not Walking, My Shoes Keep Walking Back to You. I had the walking deal and the shoes mixed up. I apologize for that. I'll try not to make any more mistakes, but I'm flying off the top of my head. No Wikipedia, no internet, nothing online. It's just what I saw, the life I lived 4 decades in Nashville. Well, I'm going to saddle up and drift right now. I've enjoyed being with you. Somebody bring up Old Paint. Yep, here comes Old Paint. Pull him up tight now because I'm a big boy and I got to get on him and ride off. Listen, we'll see you next time. We'll have another interesting story to tell you on another artist. I hope you'll again subscribe and share this, like it, do everything in the world to help me build this audience. I'm out of here. God bless each and every one of you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Kilroy's Outlaws and Legends Behind the Music. If you have any thoughts or questions about the content, email them. Kilroy Outlaws and Legends, all one word, at yahoo.com. That's Kilroy, no S, Outlaws and Legends, all one word, at yahoo.com. And don't forget to subscribe. Third-party use of any part of this podcast without the expressed consent of Eddie Kilroy is prohibited. The Kilroy's Outlaws and Legends Behind the Music podcast is a production of Eddie Kilroy.